Welcome back. Parliament has passed the Prevention and Combating of Torture of Persons Bill with the support of all political parties. The bill provides that everyone has the right to freedom and security, which includes the right not to be tortured in any way. It gives effect to the South African government's obligation to the United Nations Convention Against Torture and other cruel, inhumane or degrading treatment or punishment. Such offences will be punishable with a life sentence.
This bill would establish for the first time the offence of torture as a separate offence under our law. As the law presently stands, any act of torture will be unlawful and an alleged perpetrator will be prosecuted in respect of the act amounting to torture, which would in most instances amount to an offence of assault, including assault with intent to inflict grievous bodily harm or even attempted murder. However, the mere fact that the offence in question is not recorded as torture and that complaints of alleged instances of torture are not recorded as such makes it very difficult to obtain an accurate picture of the prevalence, whether real or perceived, of the scourge of torture. In the absence of such reliable information, it is also difficult to develop strategies that are aimed at addressing the problem and assessing the plight of victims. Furthermore, it stands to reason that the establishment of torture as a stand-alone offence that is clearly viewed by the legislator as an exceptionally serious offence in that perpetrator would, on conviction, be sentenced to a term of imprisonment.
Now, this new piece of legislation also makes provision for awareness programs to members of the public and officials of state departments,
ensuring that all public officials who may be involved in the custody, interrogation or treatment of a person subjected to any form of arrest, detention or imprisonment are educated and informed of the prohibition against torture. 3, providing assistance and advice to any person who wants to lodge a complaint of torture. And lastly, training of public officials on the prohibition, prevention and combating of torture.
The chairperson of Parliament's Portfolio Committee of Justice and Constitutional Development, Llewellyn Landers, said the bill is in line with international law, which stipulates that torture is not permissible under any circumstances, including war and public emergencies. This also includes state of emergencies and terrorist threats.
Even at this late stage, Mr. Speaker, it is appropriate for our constitutional democracy to have this law on our statute books, given the shameful history we have referred to. In terms of this law, torture is now an offence punishable by imprisonment for up to life. Its implications are that police officers who assault people held in their cells can now be charged and prosecuted for torture. It means that prison warders who allow inmates in their care to be abused, raped or sodomized could be charged and prosecuted for the crime of torture. It also means that Home Affairs officials at our border posts at Lindela who abuse illegal immigrants by assaulting them may be charged and prosecuted for the crime of torture.
Ms. Debbie Schaefer of the DA outlined a number of incidents of torture which she said still occur within South Africa's borders, among others the recent Marikana tragedy.
In August this year, in the Marikana matter, the IPID took 194 affidavits from minors who alleged that they were beaten up in the police cells. On the 25th of October at Wonderkop, Marikana, Tolakele Dlunga was reportedly assaulted and choked in his home by police, with a black bag over his head. He was then taken to Fort King police station, where he was again tortured, reportedly for information related to the location of others involved in the Lonmin strike. On the 23rd of October, Anele Zonke, 26 years old, was reportedly also arrested by a plainclothes policeman, beaten and suffocated. The effect of this torture is vividly described in an article in the Daily Maverick. The torture he suffered has left him ashamed and withdrawn. Torture shames the victim, shames him because he is rendered powerless, at the mercy of his tormentors, ashamed that he undoubtedly gave the police many of the answers they sought. The preamble to this bill reminds us of our shameful history of human rights abuses. The events that I have highlighted are no doubt just some of those that are actually still taking place today.
Luzelle Adams of Cope said many South Africans are roaming the streets with scars of torture on their bodies and in their minds. This, she said, should never happen again.
Torture at the hands of government officials today is still as alive as torture during the time of Steve Biko. The only difference now is that the governments have changed, but the torture practices still exist to some extent. We continuously hear of criminally accused people that were assaulted in order to make incriminating statements. The known words of the former National Commissioner of Police, Mr. Beki Cele, that the police shall skiet bliksem and use the D word that my mother never allowed me to use, still ring in my ears. From today onwards, we will be able to call those assaults torture.
The IFP supported the bill but raised concerns about the possibility of extradition, which could place the lives of foreign nationals in danger and expose them to the risk of torture in their countries of origin. The ACDP and the Freedom Front Plus also supported the bill.
However, Clause 8 makes it a crime and creates an obligation for the state not to expel, return or extradite people there where they could be facing the threat of torture. This seems to be a remote possibility for the activities of the South African government, but I urge you, Madam Deputy Speaker, not to consider it so.
Cases of torture have up to now been classified as assault or attempted murder. We trust that the bill will help this situation where we've now got a clear definition of torture. The Centre for the Study of Violence and Reconciliation has said that the sad reality is that such acts of torture and cruel, inhumane and degrading treatment are regular occurrences in our society and are perpetuated by those responsible for our safety and security. This, the ACDP believes, is reprehensible and must be addressed.
Government must take note that case law exists that compel our courts to heed international law, especially treaties, even in the absence of enabling legislation. In this regard, it is to be noted that the prohibition on torture is a peremptory norm of international law and can under no circumstances be deviated from. Die Vryheidsfront Plus steun die implementering van wetgewing teen marteling volkome. Uiteindelik het ons nou wetgewing wat die verpligtinge in terme van die verdrag kodifiseer.
I dedicate my speech to the victims of torture and other cruel, inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment. The people's poet, Mzwakhe Mbuli, has a poem with stanza that says, "I'm no stranger to torture. I'm no stranger to detention without trial." Deputy Speaker, I stand here before this august house as one of the surviving victims of torture and detention without trial, solitary confinement. Some of those victims have been mentioned here are no more. May their souls rest in peace.
It's time for a commercial break. A View from the House will be back in a moment. Stay tuned.